Hey, brand builders, ready to take your brand to the next level? I'm Dana Ammons, and welcome to the Brand Blueprint.
Hello, and welcome to the Brand Blueprint. I'm your host, Dana Ammons, founder and CEO of Value Growth Partners and host of the Brand Blueprint. Each week, we dive deep with founders and brand leaders to uncover the strategies that powered their growth, from marketing pivots to funding playbooks. And today is no exception. I have a really exciting guest packed in for our episode today. And this episode actually kicks off our funding and scaling capsule, where we will be exploring how brands expand across borders, platforms, and retail channels. I am thrilled to welcome our guest, Shaheen Samavati. Shaheen, whose expertise in scaling social media globally and building European market strategies has driven real success for fast-growing brands. And so we're so excited to have her on the show today to share her expertise with us. Thank you for joining the show, Shaheen.
Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. I know we have quite an expanse in hours right now. I am interviewing and broadcasting from Phoenix, Arizona, where I recently relocated. It's at a very bright and early 4:35 a.m. in the morning, but this is kind of what we do in the podcasting world. So tell me a little bit about, just to start the interview, where you are and exactly what time zone you may be attending the interview from.
Yeah, even though I'm American, I'm based in Malaga, Spain. So
very nice.
Time zone.
Very nice. And that might be actually a start in our questioning. But when we before we jump right in, are you ready to get started by jumping into our rapid fire question and answer segment?
Yes, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, great. Look, I am itching with a couple of questions, and you just prompted one. You are in Spain. Us in the U.S. Have definitely dealt with some power grid challenges over the last couple of years, but just recently you were in the news for a pretty interesting, situation. The power grid went down, and as it looked, at least from afar, for us as Americans, looked like Spaniards just turned it into an opportunity to take an extended siesta. So tell us a little bit about where were you at during the blackout and how did you approach it?
Yeah, I was actually in a video call with two of my colleagues, and one was in Barcelona and one was in Madrid, and I'm in Malaga. And then we disconnected, and then two of us got back on our phone and reconnected, and we're like, oh, sorry, my power went out. And my colleague was like, oh, but my power went out. And we're in like totally different cities. We're like, wait a second, something weird's going on here. And then the phone connection went out too, just like half an hour later. So it was super scary. We were like, what's going on? Yeah, apparently the phone people depend on power as well. So, so it wasn't just the power. It was like all communications, no internet, no phone service. It was, and we're like, we thought it was the end of the world.
Yeah, like a terrorist attack or something. I'm sure.
That was everyone thought it. Everyone thought it was like, oh, it must be like a cyber attack. We have two small kids, so we ended up. Well, after we went to the supermarket that was still open because they had a generator, and we bought water and supplies, like the whole neighborhood. And then we went to the park, and all our friends, other parents from our kids' school were there. We were all like speculating on what was going on. But yeah, it was a really interesting day. Interestingly, the bars didn't close, and lots of people in our neighborhood were just like hanging out on the terraces. It was a really like beautiful
That's what I
day,
think I saw, right? I saw clips of that, of people kind of hanging out on their terraces at the parks. I saw people at sidewalk cafes just enjoying themselves. So it was definitely, I think, a decidedly different reaction than I think what would happen right now in the U.S. in any other major city, other maybe than like a Houston or somebody who's experienced some power grid outages. Yeah. But if that happened in Phoenix, I guarantee you there would be full-on panic. So kudos to the Spaniards and Europeans for handling it in a
I think my level of panic was above average being an American. A lot of people were really chill with it. A lot of the parents I saw in the park, and they're like, oh yeah, I didn't even go to the store or anything. Like, it's probably fine.
No, I think like you, I would have at least made the frenetic store run. I mean, you can't, trust any of these things. And as a parent, You're a parent.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, if it was just me, maybe there's a bit of risk at, there, but as a parent of 3 kids as well, I know all too well what that feeling's like when you start thinking, man, am I going to have to deal with no power, which means no electrical devices, no refrigerator, which means no snacks, right? Like those are 2 powerful tools in the parent tool chest to keep kids, keep kids calm. So that had to be a really interesting time, even from that standpoint. I bet you, there were probably kids who hadn't been off an electric device in a couple of years. And so that nice, break may have been a nice reminder for them as well.
I mean, that was our motivator too for staying in the park, because we're like, we can't entertain them.
Exactly, right.
Keep them out as long as possible.
Classic. All right. So starting our rapid fire question with the Spain specific, but let's shift it to a more traditional question. So one of the questions I always like to ask, especially when I have international guests, is coffee or tea or something else? What do you start your morning with?
Yeah, well, I grew up with tea, but I think because I'm Iranian American, so we had tea at the house all the time, several times a day.
Oh, that's right. Part of your cultural tradition.
Absolutely. But nowadays I have to go with coffee. I can't live without the coffee, my café con leche in the morning.
I love that. Yeah. Now, in Spain, is there a ritual or routine around your morning coffee? Like, do you go to a cafe? Do you just go to Starbucks and pick it up? Like, kind of what's the routine look like?
I mean, lots of people have it at home. I love to go to the cafe below my house and have a quick coffee in the morning after I drop off the kids. So
I love it.
And the unique thing about Malaga is they're very, when you order coffee, it's very specific. It's not like this everywhere in Spain, but a specific thing about Malaga is that you order very specifically how much milk you want in your coffee. And there's different names for it. So I always order a mitad, which is half coffee, half milk, but you can order a sombra, which is just a shadow of milk. There's different funny names for different
but
coffee orders.
It's all to the degree of milk in the... Now, is that because the region is maybe more in tuned or attuned to, I guess, milk and use of milk in coffee, or just happens to be something about Malaga that...
Yeah, it's just how strong do you want your coffee, basically, and how much, because you can also order an Americano, which is an American style coffee, which is adding water. Watered down coffee. Yeah.
That would be food. Now, tell me this, have you American, live in Spain, very internationally traveled. What is your favorite global city?
Yeah, well, besides Malaga, which is a very international, amazing city, and of course, this is why I chose to live here. Yeah. I would go with Brussels, which is probably not a typical choice, but it's basically the capital of Europe, and it's a place that I've been spending a lot of time lately, and I really like it because it's really international, and I found it's a really nice place to go with kids. Lots of really nice parks, and I don't know, just good vibes. I like Brussels a lot.
What kind of travel time or distance would that be from you from Malaga?
It's about a 2.5 hour flight, or 2 hours. More or less. Yeah.
Not bad at all.
Yeah, definitely.
Not bad at all. And the interesting thing to your point is not only is it an international city, it is, as I know from my previous days at Procter & Gamble, it is a very popular hub for international corporate headquarters and offices. Procter & Gamble has a large operation there. And in the Procter & Gamble world, in order for you to get to Europe, you've got to go through that. It's the first stops, right? So, and I think that was almost identical when I was with Colgate-Palmolive. And I always want to say SC Johnson Wax had a similar setup as well. So that is very, very interesting. Now,
yeah, it's not only obviously all the EU Parliament is there. And so you have so many international people because of that, but lots of international companies as well. And when you're just out there, you just hear all the different languages, and it's really interesting intercultural mix. Yeah,
I think the equivalent for me is New York City. I consider New York City probably the most international city, especially on the North American side. But
yeah, absolutely.
It definitely
true melting pot.
Yeah, it was, and it was probably the first city for me as a kid who grew up in the Midwest in Nebraska and Arkansas. I moved to New York City in my late 20s, and it was the first city that I had ever lived in that was such an international city. I lived in Brooklyn, commuted on the train to Manhattan every day, and I can just remember being amazed. It had always been there, right? But when you come from the Midwest and you hear all these things about New York, and then you finally get there and you experience it, you're like, nobody in this train is from here, right? There were moments where I was like, I think I'm the only it was one thing, to grow up in Nebraska and be like, I think I'm the only Black person in here. It's a whole thing to go to New York and be like, I think I'm the only American in here.
Totally, yeah.
The first time it ever happened. So tell me a little bit about your preferences from a work standpoint. What's the one digital tool that you can't live without?
Yeah, well, I use a lot of them at work, and it's hard to choose. I mean, obviously, Google is probably the one I can't live without, Google for work, but I would give a shout out to Pipedrive CRM. I think it's
I love that.
My favorite. Yeah.
No, tell us a little bit more, and this is a great answer, because I think founders watching this episode are familiar with Pipedrive. I'm familiar with Pipedrive as a consultant and somebody who needs tools like that to stay on top of things. Tell us a little bit about how you use Pipedrive. And shout out to Pipedrive. I love that platform.
Yeah, I mean, we've been using it for quite a while, like 5 or 6 years in our business, and we mainly use it as a sales CRM. But I've just found it, out of the different tools that we use, that it's really intuitive. It's really easy to set up automations and have a lot of add-on features for ways you can grow in terms of with marketing automations on the website and stuff. So we've really tapped into a lot of that, and I feel get a lot out of it.
Very, very cool. Okay, shifting gears just a little bit. What's the one word that describes your approach to growth?
I'll go with intentional.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. Explain a little bit more.
Yeah, I think growth, it's for us, at least, it's not just about revenue growth, but I mean, we're really focused on doing more meaningful work with clients who share our approach and who share our values. And we're really focused on finding long-term partnerships with the kind of clients and the kind of projects that we want to be a part of. So we're really selective about the way we grow. Maybe that should be the word, selective.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. Selective and intentional, because I think both matter, right? I think, and I really like intentional, because I am very vocal about that with my founders, that growth doesn't happen by accident, right? You don't just wake up and just, I had the right idea and it just grew, right? Everything you do to get to growth is intentional. Thank you for that, Shaheen. Great first segment from the rapid fire section. Now, are you ready to jump into the main interview?
Absolutely.
All right, great. Let's get started. So look, I always like to start with the typical founder story, but in your case, your skill sets and experience, a little bit different. So I want to talk to you, or have you talk to us a little bit more about kind of your origins. How did you get started in your career path? What first interested you in pursuing this path in marketing and media strategy, et cetera?
Yeah, so my background is in newspaper journalism. I'm so I'm from the US, and I kind of from the Midwest, not exactly the same region, but from Ohio.
Yep.
So, and I worked in newspapers there, and actually I specialized in business journalism, and I interviewed entrepreneurs. I did a column for the Plain Dealer in Cleveland that was called, well, not a column, it was a feature that ran on the weekends. It was called Bright Ideas. So I was always interviewing people about how they started their businesses. And so that was kind of how I originally got interested in entrepreneurship, and had the idea of I would like to do that. I like to start my own business. And then I decided I wanted to do an MBA so I could learn more about business, because I'd done my bachelor's degree in journalism. And then I was like, well, if I'm going to go back to school, why don't I do it abroad, go study abroad, something I never did as an undergrad. So I decided, I was looking at international programs, and I found a program that was really focused on entrepreneurship in Madrid at IE Business School, it's called. And so I did my MBA there, and with kind of a specialization in entrepreneurship. And I ended up working I ended up doing a lot of things. So I won't maybe go into all the details, but I would say significant. I worked in corporate communication in a solar panel company. That was the very first thing I did, but quickly I moved from there and was part of the founding team of a startup company.
Oh, nice.
So that was my first entrepreneurship experience, although I wasn't the CEO of that company. I was head of marketing, but I was really involved in the international growth strategy for that company. And it was a really unique opportunity because it was a company that raised a lot of venture capital very quickly. So it was a really opportunity to work with experienced entrepreneurs who kind of knew the ropes and learning a lot from them. So that was a transformative point in my career where I really learned a lot of things. Way more than I learned in my MBA. I learned in that first experience working in a high growth scale up company, because they ended up scaling to more than 30 countries. And so I was doing the part of content creation. And well, I did a lot of different things there actually, because you wear a lot of hats at the very
in the
early
startup
stage.
environment. Exactly.
Yeah. So I did that for a while, but then I decided to leave and start my own thing. So that's when I started. I was at that company just about a year, or I was involved for about 2 years, also working on like a consulting basis after, while I was also starting VeraContent. And VeraContent basically was born from that experience I had there, and at the solar panel company as well. Just like working with external providers and seeing like there was kind of room for improvement on when it came to creating that multilingual content at scale.
I love that. I mean, you had this crazy evolution. I want to go back a little bit because I think something that could be informative for our audience is your experience with pivoting and going to get your MBA, and not just going to get your MBA, but you went and got your MBA internationally, which I think is so dope because I think a lot of us as Americans don't necessarily think of that as a first option. I think many of us think of the top 5 to 10 MBA programs. We're kind of guided that way coming out of undergrad. You go to corporate for a couple of years, you hit the glass ceiling, you realize you need the MBA, or in your case, you realize you're maybe not in the right subject matter area and you need the MBA to kind of legitimize your path from a career standpoint. So talk a little bit about the benefit, what you saw as the benefits of not just going back to get your MBA when you did the pivot, but then frankly getting it internationally, which again, I think this is such a great opportunity to maybe inspire somebody else to make the same leap. Like, what made you take that leap of faith, and what did you find was really beneficial about going and doing your international MBA?
Well, it wasn't actually something I was thinking about at first, because at first I just applied like locally. Like my first option was going to be to go to Case Western Reserve, which is in Cleveland.
I know exactly.
or back to Ohio State. So I was like looking at Ohio schools. But then when I was signed up to take the GMAT, which is like the exam you have to take for entering an MBA program, I started getting all these marketing materials from like different schools, and I remember getting this like some marketing email from a school in Germany, and I was like, oh, why not? But then I was like, do I really want to go to Germany?
Right.
So then I started like doing some research into other schools and like locations that I thought were attractive. So I was I was interested in learning Spanish, so I was looking like in Spain and in Latin America.
So those are 2 really critical skill sets. You picked up a second language and got the international exposure. Very, very cool. Now, for jumping back into your corporate career, you started off in solar panel, and it sounds like communications, not really core marketing. Was that why you decided to go move and continue to move forward from that company so you could get closer to the role and the type of job you were looking to do in marketing?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, actually, when I started out of the solar panel company, I was originally hired to do PR. But actually, it was a strange. So that job was actually something that wasn't really that much in line with my interests, but it was kind of the opportunity to work in Spain. It was like, okay, because I actually was on a leave of absence from my job in the US. I had taken like a sabbatical, and I had the option to go back to my job at the newspaper. But actually, it's probably for the best that I didn't go back into newspapers, because that industry has evolved. It's completely not. I mean, the company still exists, but the number of positions has gone down a lot. So I don't know if my job would have lasted that much longer there. But well, it was definitely more secure than the one I went to, because I went to this solar panel company that was basically like living on subsidies, and when those ran out, they closed. So I actually went out of business after a year I was there. But when I first started, and they actually got rid of the department that I was in, so they moved me to the marketing department. So when I started, I was in like PR and communications, and I was basically sending out press releases and trying to get media placements in English publications. But then when after a while, I got moved to the marketing team, and I was actually doing a lot of trade show stuff, like a lot of event-based marketing. But it was my first foray into that. And then the company went out of business, and then I started freelancing, and I was doing a lot of different projects. But I saw that there was a lot of demand for English content creation at European companies. So that was like my first experience was just working as a consultant, and then I was seeing that like a lot of times didn't only need English content creation, but they needed it for more markets, and I started working with freelancers and outsourcing that, but then, like I said, I joined this startup company. So then So I kind of put that on hold while I was at the startup, but I always kept it in mind, like, okay, there's a huge demand for that. Like I already was seeing that in my experience as a freelancer. So kind of I learned the ropes of entrepreneurship while I was at Spot Home, but then I decided, okay, I'm going to go back and pursue that opportunity that I saw before. So
wow.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story. And I mean, you definitely were dual tasking. To your point, you were working in the startup, but you kind of knew you had this idea that you wanted to continue to pursue. And so you eventually get to that idea and you start developing it out. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, well, I should also say while I was at the startup, I also met my now business partners, James and Daphne. So we were, they ran a blog about Spain, basically, and in that startup, we were doing partnerships with different blogs, and so basically they were one of our content partners, and so I got to know them because of that, and then I realized that they also offered translation services, and they were had this kind of fledgling translation business that they were starting at the time, and so after I left Spot Home and I got back into the kind of content consulting stuff. I, like I mentioned, had a lot of demand for doing things in more languages. So I reached out to them and said, okay. And I knew that because of the way they handled their blog and their approach to content, and also Daphne had a background in journalism as well. I knew they kind of shared the same values in terms of the producing quality content and putting that care and attention to detail in the content production. Because I think at that time, because this was back in 2017, there was, content mills were still going strong, a lot of content that was being produced. And I mean, we're getting back to that now with AI, but
we definitely
are. But yeah, I think back in 2017, a lot of brands and marketers understood that they needed to create quality content to stand out from that crowd of that quickly produced SEO content. And the search engines were getting smarter. And if you wanted to show up in results and everything, you needed to do something a bit differentiated. So I saw that James and Daphne really knew how to produce quality as well. So we started partnering on an ad hoc basis on projects. And then after about a year working together that way, we were like, okay, we should really join forces, formally create a company and do it. So and then and then the rest is history. We've been doing it now for 10 years. So,
wow. No, it is
9 years. Story. 2016 we started. Yeah.
No, that's an amazing story because you were literally ahead of the social media content scale, I think, movement, right? Where I think a lot of the social media content was being created by individual creators, consultants, right, in these small pockets. And you sound like you were on that first wave of creators that got together and said, hey, you got this superpower, I got this superpower. Let's put those superpowers together and then we could be a super team, right? So now you got the super team. And let's back up a little bit and talk about, because I think one of the things that would interest our audience is the international aspect to social media strategy, especially as it relates to European markets. So talk to us a little bit about how you first navigated social media strategy for European markets, especially with respect to audience behaviors, platforms. Can you talk to our audience about some of the key differences?
Yeah, I should give the context as well, because I was talking about content projects in general, but it's true that we kind of, and I mentioned my background's in journalism and we did a lot of blog content creation. They ran a blog. I later had a blog as well, but we kind of fell into social media marketing. I would say I personally have had an interest in social media usage, building communities on social media. I've always been really into that, and I've led really large Facebook groups, and I'm really into using social media. But and then we had an opportunity with a client early on who hired us to run their international social media pages.
Oh, nice.
And so that was, and it was something that I can't even remember. It was actually James who had that contact, and I don't remember the story of how we got it, but but we were running social media pages for them in I think around 10 markets at one point.
Wow.
So that was kind of a crash course in that, and since then we've actually created a separate department. So we have our editorial content team, and we have a social media team who's specialized. Especially, we do a lot of work on Meta platforms, Facebook, Instagram.
Yeah.
And we've been expanding into TikTok, and we do some LinkedIn now as well.
Nice.
And
still multiple country, multiple markets across.
Yeah,
Europe?
We only take on projects that are in at least 3 markets. So that's kind of our Yeah.
A minimum of 3 markets.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, note to self to our audience, if you're ready to work with Shaheen and her company, get your markets up, because you can't go in there with just 1 or 2 markets. You got to have 3. I love that.
Well, we find that, I mean, we'll start out with 1 market on a test basis, but there needs to be like the projection that it's going to be a multi-market project, because that's really where we add value, because we're really like experts in handling all handling the operations of having these multiple in-market teams. Yep. So if you just need 1 team for 1 market, I mean, it makes sense to hire a local agency, probably in your case.
Correct. Instead of across multiple markets. No, it makes total sense. Yeah. So talk a little bit about, back to that point, now that you've given that context, what are some key differences between the European market and the US market as it relates to audience and platforms and strategy?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is that the European market isn't just 1 market. It's like, depending on how you look at it, it can be more than 40 markets. Or it's at least 27 countries in the EU. So each one is like pretty unique. There's huge cultural differences across the markets, huge differences in the way they use platforms and which platforms they're on and to what extent they use them. So it's something that in each country you have to have each country or each community that you're trying to reach, you might want to have a different strategy. So it's
now is there I think Americans, we're so used to cultures bending to fit our needs versus the other way around, right? So we don't, I think especially brands in many cases don't have this pressure in the US market to meet their audiences where they are. But in Europe, with 40 plus different markets, multiple languages, multiple cultural differences, how do you even take a social media campaign and convert it to all of those different markets and cultural preferences?
Yeah. So by prioritizing and then having a clear strategy, I think, I mean, it's usually a bad idea to try to go into all 40 at once. So it's really thinking about which markets are the most important. Yeah. What's my priority? I mean, you can consider doing some cross-European campaigns, but I think there has to be like a clear justification for that and clear approach and like how you're going to do it.
Now, in that approach and strategy, how do you prevent from allowing the brand's voice to become, essentially watered down or customized to each market versus keeping the brand image and the brand voice consistent? Like, do you find a challenge with, hey, we need to localize this, but then also it might change the campaign or change the brand approach?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen a little bit of everything. Like, I mean, a really common, I guess, mistake that brands make is like just trying to use the same content and translate it, and then it might not resonate or land well in the target market.
Wow, that was a really important point. Can we hear that again?
I mean, a really common, I guess, mistake that brands make is like just trying to use the same content and translate it, and then it might not resonate or land well in the target market. And we even see sometimes, a client might ask us to adapt something for a market, and we really change the approach, and they're kind of married to the original idea, and it's like, okay, but it just doesn't work. We have to change it, maybe. So it's just like understanding that culture would have a totally different would receive that message in a totally different way. So it's like, you have to trust the people on the ground. But at the same time, I do think it's really important. And that's something that we help our clients with a lot is like creating custom guidelines for each of the markets and having clear, because I think that's the risk. I was going to say on the flip side, that's the other thing we see is like some companies have, it's kind of like really fragmented the way they run things. So they have local people running the local content in the local pages and creating, if it's B2B, maybe they're creating the local case studies and doing all this stuff, and they're not doing it the same way as in another market, and they're representing the brand like totally differently. So a lot of times that is like at the beginning of a project, a lot of the work is trying to create some standards across the board and like, okay, this is the way, the visual guidelines, this is the content guidelines, creating like we have this tone of voice guidelines for the US market, for example. We're going to take that and adapt it for the other markets. And so looking at those same kind of situations and what do we do in this other language? How do we handle capitalization? How do we handle, the way we reply in comments and all those things. It's like really documenting all of that and having clear instructions, because another thing is when you're working with so many people across different markets, sometimes those people need to change. So,
Right.
So when the new person comes in as well, they need to have everything like super clear what the expectations are and how to execute the content. So,
man, I love that. I mean, you're right. That could be a blind spot for any founder, especially trying to manage it themselves. All of those different markets, all of those different cultural expectations and approaches, right? There very well could be a lot of inconsistency as you start to expand, especially with people with different remote markets, right? Different language barriers. How do you and your team stay up to date and abreast on all of the different kind of localized trends and changes? Because I'm sure there are, things that might be really popular and trendy in Spain that may not necessarily be as popular or as trendy in Germany, for instance. So how do you stay up to date on what's happening out there?
Yeah, I mean, of course, like we subscribe to certain like local newsletters and marketing things in the different markets, but it's also relying on the people on the ground. I mean, they're the ones who know the market the best, who actually live there. For most of our projects, like when it comes to social media management, the person managing the page is local, and that's important because they know that they're able to respond quickly to local trends. They're obviously following other pages in that local market. And they're able to like adapt quickly. And also for some of the platforms, it's actually really important to be physically there because of it actually looks at your, like for TikTok, for example, you need to have a sim that's like in that country to be able to be shown in recommendations in that same country.
Right, so, right. Yeah. That's which I think, to your point, is maybe some of those aspects American brands miss or don't quite understand. Can you talk about a couple of other either common misperceptions that U.S. brands enter into the European market and make with regard to social media strategy, and then some of the common, call it challenges that just occur because the brand is coming from the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, as we kind of mentioned, direct translation, like not taking the care in actually like localizing for the market, maybe not doing the right amount of audience research before entering a market, like to really understand what might work and what might not work. Probably expanding too fast, as I was mentioning too, like trying to do too much at once. Not being consistent, that kind of thing.
And talk a little bit about that. I mean, scaling fast is a big issue here in the US as well, especially in the tech side. You've got all of these unicorn brands that are trying to get to $100 million valuations as fast as they can, right? It leads to missteps. What are some of the more common mistakes that brands make when expanding social media marketing in Europe too quickly?
I mean, I think first of all is like you need to make sure that you have a strategy that's working, like that's been tested before you like try to do it on a super huge scale, because you can just throw a lot of money out the window very quickly. So yeah, so that's the thing. I mean, I've definitely seen that with some companies that or like, okay, we're going to go into 30 markets and we need to do all this content, and then they like change their mind, and then it's like all that you did was like a waste. Basically. Total
waste. And just stopping right there, because this is probably important, because I know a couple of people were probably watching and going, well, how do I measure, or what are the key KPIs that would tell me up front my campaign's effective enough to scale? So talk a little bit about how you and your team assess effectiveness of a campaign before you take it to a wider or global level.
I mean, it's determining like success metrics at the beginning of the project, like like having really clear what do you want to see before you start anything, because I do see that a lot. Like we just need to start producing. A lot of times there's like pressure, especially when it's like a scale-up company with investment backing. It's like the investor wants us to be in all these markets. We got to be there like tomorrow. And there's like no time to like think strategically about it. But I think that in the end, I mean, it's their money. They can do what they want, but a lot of times they don't end up getting the results they want. And then they end up deciding afterwards, after spending all that money, like, oh, actually, we want to just focus on these 5 markets and go really deep and, really make sure that we're connecting in those markets. So, or like they realize as well that for the budget they have, you can't maybe do the level of like create the quality that you want for that many markets at once. Like you need to put a certain amount of attention and care into the work, and it's like doing it too many at once. It's not possible.
Can we hear that again?
It's determining like success metrics at the beginning of the project. Like like having really clear what do you want to see before you start anything. Because I do see that a lot. Like we just need to start producing. A lot of times there's like pressure, especially when it's like a scale up company with investment backing. It's like the investor wants us to be in all these markets. We got to be there like tomorrow. And there's like no time to like think strategically about it. But I think that in the end, I mean, it's their money. They can do what they want, but a lot of times they don't end up getting the results they want. And then they end up deciding afterwards, after spending all that money, like, oh, actually, we want to just focus on these 5 markets and go really deep and, really make sure that we're connecting in those markets. So, or like they realize as well that for the budget they have, you can't maybe do the level of like create the quality that you want for that many markets at once. Like you need to put a certain amount of attention and care into the work, and it's like doing it too many at once. It's not possible.
Yeah, and I think that's a common problem in the U.S. as well. But I think in the U.S., which is interesting, you find brands that are really marketing at a micro level in a sense when they're thinking about communities in a city. Or even, as small as neighborhoods or sides of, town. And you think about the global reach of social media, right? And that's just such a small kind of limited way to look at it from a strategy standpoint. So let's talk about a couple of those key KPIs. What are some of the key KPIs that you and your team typically use to measure success with regard to some of the social media campaigns you execute?
Yeah. Well, what I was saying depends on the particular business. Like we have, like some businesses, like if it's more digital, like for example, we've worked with like products that are sold online. I mean, you can measure like actually how many of that project is being sold and have a goal around that. And that's like ideal if you can actually track like how much, like the journey of the user, if they came from social media and end up buying the product, and that's like to have a clear like how much traffic and how much sales you want coming from that channel, I think is ideal. In some other cases though, like we don't have the luxury of having such a clear goal.
Right.
And it is more just about branding and like brand awareness. But we've had some like more specific goals about like we want to do this many influencer partnerships with these types of influencers, for example, and we know like we're going to be able to like reach their audience through these campaigns. So that was the goal, to get more exposure through those partnerships and then ultimately to like grow the follower count on the page.
I love that. I love that. Now, in terms of some of the tactics that work here in the US are very trendy here versus Europe, and you talked a little bit about is the influencer strategy. In the US, what we're seeing is a shift from macro influencers to more micro influencers and localized influencers. Is that similar trend similar in the from the US to Europe markets? And if not, or if so, what are some of the similarities or differences?
Yeah, we've definitely seen that as a trend in Europe as well, and that's something that we've been doing a lot of. Is like I was saying, when we were doing like an Instagram project, a big part of it is finding the right people to do like collaborative posts with, and having those local people on the ground who are like in charge of monitoring the local market and connecting with other accounts in that market, and finding those micro influencers that might not be so easy to be aware of if you're not actually in the market. So. Yeah, that's something I think is super important in any Instagram strategy right now.
Yeah, I definitely see that. Now, talking about the platform strategies, there's been a lot of noise here in the US about the potential loss of TikTok as a functional app in this market. And a lot of influencers, a lot of brands depend on TikTok to drive their brand awareness. In Europe, how are you and your team approaching the channel strategy with regard to what platforms to use, and if there is, a similar threat or similar potential issue with something, like TikTok, how do you shift your marketing strategy away from a channel that you were really using effectively?
Yeah, I don't know if others have experienced differently, but like the brands that we work with are still really interested in TikTok despite the risks. So
Agreed. Yeah, we're still seeing that here with a lot of my clients.
yeah.
They don't even seem to acknowledge that it potentially is going away.
Yeah, I guess most marketers are kind of banking on that, like some kind of solution is going to be found, and they're going to just take away TikTok. Someone will buy it, or they'll come to some agreement.
Yeah.
So I find that like most brands we work with are still like investing in TikTok and want to grow on TikTok. And clearly, like, I mean, one option is to, if you're outside the US, you can still use TikTok. The only thing is if you're targeting a US audience, then maybe it's not the most,
right, the
most effective platform.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, are there other social media platforms that US marketers might not be familiar with that are fairly effective in Europe?
I would say at this point, like there definitely were in the past some pretty popular platforms that were more Europe specific, but most of them have kind of lost ground to the more internationally popular ones. So, I mean, Meta is pretty dominant in Europe now as well. So, like, and of course, if you're working cross market, it does make sense to kind of work with the largest platforms.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, Instagram has grown hugely in popularity across Europe, TikTok as well. So, yeah, I wouldn't say I'm not even like, man, I'm like drawing a blank on the names of some of these platforms. Like there was there was kind of a big competitor to LinkedIn in Germany, that's been losing ground to LinkedIn as well. Like LinkedIn is so, and then also in Spain, we had a pretty big competitor to Facebook that has died completely. So,
wow. So the channels are fairly similar with respect, right, to platforms. Maybe a bit different in terms of regionalization or use of those platforms, but not that different. Now, in that same vein, are you seeing any other trends or new or emerging platforms in the social media marketing category that you feel like people need to be aware of?
What did you say? Any trends in the category?
New trends or even new platforms that may be emerging there in Europe that we in the US just are not up on yet?
I mean, I don't know. I think some of those emerging platforms are probably similar. I mean, we're seeing like people looking for alternatives to Twitter or to X, right? Like there was brands that were like really reliant on X in the past, or what was formerly known as Twitter, and are like, okay, they're just losing traffic there. So it's like, where can I go? And there hasn't been like a real like obvious. I mean, there's obviously Threads, but it hasn't.
But it hasn't yet.
Yeah,
it hasn't replaced it. It is an interesting almost gap in the social media marketing strategy. Now I noticed that there's still a lot of templates that have a spot for your X link or your X content. And more often I find myself like, I don't really need that part of the template, right? Or I'll open up a template and it'll have the X logo hard coded on the template. And I'm like, I can't use that, right? Like I don't really use X. And I have a page for all of my various platforms and brands. I think every founder I work with has an X page. But to your point, I think very few brands are really actively pushing content there as much as they are in TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. So, and LinkedIn is now becoming a much more popular, I think, platform. Maybe not as consistent with the platform itself, though, right? I feel like I'm going on LinkedIn at times and I have to pull my phone back and go, is this Facebook I'm looking at or is this LinkedIn? Oh, this is LinkedIn, right? Because the quality of content and postings, people are starting to forget that this is a business, community.
Yeah, I was going to say like pretty much everyone is copycatting and all of the platforms are starting to feel the same. And it's a little sad because you've got like, actually like Twitter used to be the place where you would go and like see what was going on in the world or see what's going on in your community, like when there was a big trend or something. And I find now I'm like, oh, what are people saying about this thing? And it's hard to, it's like there's not a place to go for that anymore.
No, there's not.
Yeah. And then Facebook has completely changed as well. It used to be the place where you like connected with people that you knew.
Right.
And now they're just flooding you with reels of, or whatever they're calling them on Facebook.
Of content of people who you don't know. Right.
Yeah,
it is changing. And I think also as every age group and generation kind of, experiences social media more and more, we're changing in terms of how we use it. And one of the things that I've noticed for people above 40, 45 in the US is there's this kind of migration to certain platforms, almost as if, well, nobody else my age is on this one, so I need to go on and move over here, right? And I find that a lot of Americans, older Americans, are primarily sitting on Facebook, and then they're kind of testing the waters out in other places, primarily driven by their kids, right? Like if the kids are on TikTok or the kids are on Instagram, mom, dad, get on it. They're on it a little bit, but they're primarily Facebook. And then it's the exact opposite with our younger generations. They are primarily on Instagram and TikTok. You won't find them on Facebook. And many of them will say to me, hey, Mr. Ammons, I have a Facebook page, but I never look at it. So please don't send anything there, right? So do you find that similar trend in Europe?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's also, older generations on Facebook. Yeah, young people on TikTok and Instagram for sure. Yeah.
It's definitely pretty marquee. Now,
and then you do some like emerging ones, like there's this Be Real, for example. I don't know if that's popular in the US, but
it's starting to take off. I'm hearing I'm hearing that more and more here. And I think people are just hungry for something else. Jump on and to try to drive some new followers on.
Yeah, absolutely. But actually some of those new platforms that are more focused on having more exclusive connections with people, because we're seeing some trend there, because like we were saying, all of the mainstream platforms are just like showing you promoted content or showing you recommended content. So if you want to actually use the platform to connect with your friends, I think there's less opportunity for brands, obviously, because the promoted content is where they want to be, right? So but I think it at least is serving the function of actually helping people be social on social media, which was what it was supposed to be about in the first place. Right?
No, I love that. Now, one other question I wanted to ask you, Shaheen, before we wrapped up, and this is something I actually didn't pre-prompt you on, but I think you'll be able to help our audience with the answer. And it came to me as you were talking about kind of the differences in the European market versus the U.S. market. In the U.S., a lot of brands are still vying for retail presence and distribution. And obviously we have some big retail players here, Walmart and Target, et cetera. And I think you've probably seen in the news, there's a lot of backlash with some of these retailers, especially as it relates to their DEI efforts and their programs to bring in underrepresented founders and brands, blah, blah, blah. And that's been a real win for a lot of brands here in the US to be able to get into the shelves of Walmart or Target. I mean, it completely changes a brand's trajectory. The European market's different. And I have some experience working in the European market from a retail standpoint. And it's a different conversation with US brands about the impact of European retail brands on your business and where they kind of rank in the importance of distribution. Talk to me a little bit about your client base and how they approach the retail. Is more of your business and more of the European market in the direct to consumer category, or are there some key retailers or some key countries and markets that if you are a retail based brand, you want to start here first?
I mean, in terms of I think as we were kind of talking about, in the US, you have things are a lot more homogenized, I guess. You can target the entire country
almost.
And you have a lot of the same retailers, for example, operating nationwide, which you don't see that. You see, we are definitely seeing retailers growing across Europe.
Consolidation.
Consolidation, or some retailers buying other retailers, in other markets. But it's not. We don't have Walmart that's everywhere in Europe.
Correct.
Not yet. I mean, we have Walmart in the UK and a few places, I think. But So everything is Europe is more fragmented. Go-to-market strategy for Europe is always more complicated, and that's the problem we try to help our clients solve. But in terms of a particular
retailer, is there a country where you would say if I was coming over with a brand that was largely retail based in the consumer products segment, let's say a beauty product, would there be a country or set of countries you would recommend we focus on because they have just a stronger retail environment than others?
I mean, definitely the largest economies like Germany, France. I mean, they have their retailers they have across other markets as well, like Carrefour or
all the
exactly, Lidl and these
Lidl.
I would say those are the and they might use different brands in the different markets, but it's like the same.
Those are the same, different, the main doors. Now, what about the presence and the competitiveness of Amazon in the European marketplace? Obviously, that's another popular destination for brand owners here in the US. They want to get on Amazon. They, feel like, hey, being on Amazon is the best place to be. Is that relevant in Europe?
Absolutely, but Amazon is also more fragmented in Europe. Like they use different pages, like they use different URLs in the different markets. So it's like a different version of Amazon.
In every market.
Yeah, or some are combined, but like for example, in Portugal, it's they use Amazon.es in Portugal. So the distribution for like Spain and Portugal is one, but then in other countries in Europe, it's a different Amazon. So like you would need to have like different listings on the different Amazon, and then there's the whole thing with like, I don't even know how that works with customs and and all of that, like the shipping logistics of it and having to deal with like the different rules in the different countries.
Now, do you guys have to track all those different links and pages within your social media content and postings, right? So if they have a EU versus a Germany versus another country, you have to make sure those links and all of those leads within your content are correct, right?
Yeah, I actually have not got into in the nitty gritty myself on that part. We'll have to talk to a project manager on our team on how they actually deal with that. But yeah,
I got to believe that's a pretty complicated piece because, and again, I think one of the things that you are really helping shed some light on for U.S. brands is that it's not going to be the simple cookie cutter process to add Europe as if it was an extra state, right, in your strategy in the U.S. So it's not just as simply saying, well, I got this great U.S. strategy, I'll just add the Europe market and we'll be off to the races, right? Europe is an entirely separate entity in and of itself with multiple countries, multiple cultures, multiple languages. So I really appreciate you shedding some light on this. Now, before we wrap up, I want to allow you to give some pointers and some different key takeaways to our audience. And one of the things I wanted to start with is for early stage founders that are hesitant about going global. And after listening to this interview, what's the one actionable step you would encourage them to take today to begin the testing of international waters?
I mean, I guess the first step, like I was saying, is actually like doing your market research and deciding strategically where you want to focus. I think that's absolutely the first step you need to take, and like think about. First of all, you just need to decide your business strategy and have your business strategy clear before you think about marketing strategy, obviously. But you'd be surprised not every company does that.
Right.
So, yeah.
Warning, the following information is important. You may want to pay attention.
I guess the first step, like I was saying, is actually like doing your market research and deciding strategically where you want to focus. I think that's absolutely the first step you need to take, and like think about. First of all, you just need to decide your business strategy and have your business strategy clear before you think about marketing strategy, obviously. But you'd be surprised not every company does that.
Right.
So yeah.
And And Shaheen, would you say, because I want you to also give a pitch for VeraContent, like what does partnering with VeraContent look like? How should a client or a potential client, somebody interested in working with you to help expand their marketing in the European market, how should they start that conversation?
So definitely like booking a discovery call with us through our website, which is veracontent.com. And actually for new clients, like we always start out with what we call a free content consultation. So where we like give our high level insights on how we think you're doing with content internationally. Yep. And then, and we also always offer like, if it makes sense, a free piece of a free test piece, basically, where we show you like the type of content we can produce for you in one of the markets. So if you're thinking about, having a partner for international content creation or social media management, definitely get in touch with us and we can see how we can help.
I love that. And I want to make sure our listeners understand and viewers understand, you're not just limited to Spain. So talk a little bit about the markets that you cover.
Yeah, so we've worked in almost all of the Western European markets. So we're really specialized in European markets, like I mentioned. But we've also worked like a lot of times our clients want to centralize everything, and they also operate in Japan or also operate in Australia. So we've done a lot of other major international world markets. The one market that we don't work in that much is China because it's so specific. But we have a partner there as well. So we are really happy to help a brand who wants to centralize all their international projects in one place, and we can help manage also with our partners, even if it's markets that we don't directly work in.
I love that. I love that. We might have to come back and do a second episode on China as a market. I think if you can guess right now, it's a very, very interesting and hot topic here in the U.S., especially as our president continues to wage this tariff battle across the globe. So I think our audience is definitely interested in understanding what implications that may have with regard to branding and marketing, right? Which is another episode. I know I don't have you for 2 hours, so I can't dominate your time. So Shaheen, I am looking forward to having you come back. And maybe you can actually be a periodic commentator for us on all things Europe as it relates to a lot of these changes. Because I can tell you there are just so many conversations happening here in the US right now, especially with regard to sourcing and driving new markets. With this tariff conversation, a lot of small brand owners and founders are having to really rethink plans that they may have had going into this year to actually expand into international markets, right? Like I think, unfortunately, for all but the biggest brands, that is probably not the best strategy in 2025 until there's a bit more clarity on
more certainty.
So a lot of uncertainty, a lot of challenges in the U.S. market with brands. And I wouldn't say U.S. market. I think this president, unfortunately, has created these challenges for global brands and startups, right? Because even markets or brands looking to enter in the U.S. market.
Yeah, I think it's even harder for them, I think.
Right. They're having to really, really reevaluate how important this market is to their overall strategy, which I can't imagine the U.S. market not being an important cog, right, in the building blocks of trying to go after market share. But the reality is, if the cost is too prohibitive because of these tariffs, you got to find somewhere else to hunt. So we will definitely be looking forward to having you on the show again to continue to help our audience navigate everything that is European marketing and social media execution. But I want to first thank you for coming on the show today. This has been such a pleasurable conversation and interview. I think you've dropped a lot of great insights on our audience. I'll be remiss without letting you first give all of your key social media handles and websites for our audience so that they can follow up with you. And I want my audience, especially those of you who are considering expanding into the European market, to reach out and do an introductory call with VeraContent and Shaheen's team. So Shaheen, can you give everybody your socials?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically at VeraContent on Instagram. And if you just search VeraContent on any of the major channels, we're there. Definitely check out our YouTube channel. We've been putting out a lot of content on YouTube. So
Love that.
And follow me on LinkedIn if you like. Add me.
I always encourage our audience, reach out to Shaheen on LinkedIn. You will see her connected to me. You can find her under me, or you can find her directly at Shaheen Samavati. So Shaheen, I again thank you for coming on the show. We're so excited whenever we have somebody come in from an international market. I actually have a team member who I know she's kicking herself for not making this call today. But Eloise Lanois is our Spain resident Spain member of the team. She's actually in Madrid and leads all of our creative and design work in the production on the show. So she'll be so happy to have a fellow Spaniard join the show today. And I am looking forward again to having you back on as well. So thanks again. And for our audience, don't hesitate to watch, download, and share this content with founders that you know, especially founders that you know who are interested in going international. This is a great episode to share with them. As always, we will have extra content and Shaheen's profile on our website, www.thebrandblueprint.biz. Not .com, because we're about that biz. So make sure you go out, check out Shaheen's information. We have links to VeraContent so you can schedule a one-on-one and get your journey started in expanding your brand into the European market. So thanks again for joining us on the Brand Blueprint podcast. Have a great one and tune in next time for another great interview.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Brand Blueprint journey. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms to stay updated. Watch the full episodes on our YouTube channel for an in-depth experience. Don't forget to subscribe to our website at thebrandblueprint.biz for exclusive content and materials. We're everywhere you need us to be.